orchestrated fresh narrative with new characters, plot variations, and legal logic fixes. Orchestrated fresh narrative with new characters, plot variations, and legal logic fixes. The day they made me principal, I drove the long way home along the lakefront just to feel it a little longer. I had the windows cracked, even though it was March in Cleveland, and the air off Lake Erie still had teeth in it. I didn't care. I kept catching my own face in the rearview mirror, grinning like an idiot at a red light, and I thought, you did it! 12 years! 12 years of being the only woman in the room, of having my drawing second-guessed by men who couldn't read a load calculation if you printed it on their coffee, and I had done it. Principal structural engineer. And not on paper only, the Detroit Superior retrofit, a $40 million job, the kind of project that gets your name on a plaque bolted to a bridge people will drive over for 100 years. My boss had stood up in front of the whole floor and said the city chose us because of me, because of my analysis. Mine. I texted my husband from the parking garage, made principal. Got the bridge. Coming home? Let's celebrate. And he'd written back one word, cool. I told myself he was busy. I told myself he was going to surprise me, that there'd be a bottle of something open on the counter, maybe takeout from the Lebanese place I loved, maybe just him standing in the kitchen with that crooked grin I married. We'd talked about this night for years. Every time the money got tight, every time I worked a weekend, he'd squeeze the back of my neck and say, when you make principal, baby, we're golden. I held on to that the whole drive. I really did. I came in through the side door, and the house smelled like nothing. No food, no candle, nothing. Just the blue flicker of the TV and the sound of some streamer screaming about a headshot. And there he was, sunk into the recliner I bought him for Christmas, controller in his hands, a tower of empty seltzer cans on the side table. I stood in the doorway with my coat still on, holding my keys, and I said his name. He grunted. I said it again and walked over, and he leaned to see around me like I was furniture blocking the screen. Did you get my text? I asked. Yeah, principal, nice. He didn't pause the game. We could use the money. We could use the money. Not I'm proud of you. Not you earned this. Just the money, like I was an ATM that had finally finished a software update. I felt the joy go out of me the way air goes out of a tire. Not a pop, just a slow, ugly sag. But I'd had 20 years of practice making excuses for the men around me, so I made one for him too. He's tired. His own thing isn't going well. He'll come around. His own thing? My husband had quit his sales job 8 months earlier to go in on a landscaping and hardscape business with his younger brother. I'd supported it. I'd even floated them the startup money out of my bonus, told myself it was an investment, told myself a man needs to feel like he built something. What he'd built was a magnetic sign for a truck and a lot of opinions about other people's lawns. The business hadn't cleared a single profitable month. But I kept my mouth shut, because I'd learned that pointing at the numbers in my own house got me called cold. Hey, I said, softer, sitting on the arm of the couch. Can you pause it? I actually want to talk to you about something good for once. He sighed, like I'd asked him to help me move a piano. The scream froze. He looked up at me with this expression of mild inconvenience, and I would think about that expression a lot in the months that followed, because it was the truest thing he ever showed me. Actually, he said, I gotta talk to you about something too. For one stupid, hopeful second, my heart lifted. Here it is, the surprise, the reservation, the speech, the version of him I married. My mom and Dustin are moving in. I heard the words, but they didn't arrange themselves into meaning right away. My mother-in-law, my brother-in-law, moving in. Moving in where? I said. Here, obviously. He set the controller down like the conversation was already settled, like he was just informing me of the weather. Mom's lease is up, and she can't carry that place anymore, not since the diner cut her hours. And Dustin's getting evicted. The business is bleeding. He can't make rent on his apartment. They got nowhere to go. We got the room. We had 2 spare bedrooms. One was my home office, the room where I ran load models at 11 at night, because that was the only quiet I got. The other was the room we'd painted a soft green 4 years earlier and then quietly stopped talking about, because the babies never came, and it hurt too much to keep calling it the nursery. That's our office and I couldn't say it. Those rooms aren't extra, they're ours. Your office can go in the basement. It's fine. Mom takes the green room, Dustin takes your office. We fix up the basement for you to do your work thing. He had the whole map drawn. He'd planned the dismantling of my house without me in the room. And look, with your raise, it's barely a stretch. Couple more mouths. You're principal now. You can cover it. You can cover it. Not we, you. My money was the family rescue fund, and the rescue was for his family, and somehow I was supposed to be honored to fund it. So let me understand the plan, I said. And I could hear my own voice going flat and careful, the way it does when a beam is overstressed and you're calculating exactly how much load it has left. Your mom and your brother move in, and then I come home from a 10-hour day building bridges, and I do what? Cook for 4? Do everyone's laundry? Bankroll a business that's never made a dime while your brother sleeps in my office? Don't be dramatic, it's family. Mom's had a hard life. Dustin just needs a runway. That's what people do. They take care of family. He picked the controller back up, which was when I understood there was never going to be a conversation. They're coming next weekend. I told them yes. You told them yes. My name's on the deed too, Sloan. I get a say and I say my family needs help and you're my wife, so you'll make it work. You'll take care of them. End of story. You'll take care of them. The words just hung there, and in that moment I saw the whole architecture of how he thought about me, clear as a blueprint. I wasn't his partner. I was a load-bearing wall, something to hold up the people he actually cared about. My promotion wasn't ours. It was a budget line he'd already spent. My home wasn't ours. It was real estate to house his people, with me as the live-in staff. He unpaused his game, and the war sounds came back up, and I went upstairs on legs that didn't feel like mine. I want to tell you I cried. I didn't. I sat on the edge of our bed in the dark with my laptop, and I did the thing I do when the world stops making sense. I went to the numbers. I logged into our joint accounts. The savings was $3,800 short. There was a transfer dated 9 days earlier to my mother-in-law. Memo line, deposit plus moving help. 9 days. He'd moved them in 9 days before he told me. He'd already paid. He'd taken the money we'd been scraping together for years, the money that was supposed to be for the future, for the green room, for any version of us, and handed it to his mother without a single word to me. I went back downstairs. He was still playing. I said, "You took $3,800 out of our savings and gave it to your mother." He didn't look away from the screen. She needed it. That's what you do. With our money, without asking me. You're about to make a ton of money. Why are you being like this? And then he said a word he'd never once called me in 7 years of marriage. Said it easy. Said it like it had been waiting in his mouth the whole time. He called me a selfish word that started with B, defending his right to empty our life into his family's lap. And that was the moment something in me that had been bending for years finally just set, like concrete. I didn't scream. I got very, very calm. "Get out of my house," I said. He laughed. He actually laughed. "Your house? My name's on it too, sweetheart. You want to leave, there's the door. But Mom and Dustin are coming Saturday, so you can get on board or you can pack a bag. Either way, this is happening." I didn't pack a bag. Not that night. I slept in the green room with the door locked, and at 6 in the morning, with the sky going from black to grey over the rooftops, I picked up my phone and called the one person I knew would not tell me to calm down and think about the marriage. My best friend from college had gone to law school while I went to engineering school, and she'd built herself into one of the most feared family law attorneys in the county. At my wedding, she'd hugged me, looked over my shoulder at my new husband, and whispered, "He'd better be good to you, or I will take him apart so clean he won't feel it till spring." I'd laughed then. I wasn't laughing now. She picked up on the second ring. I said, "I think my marriage is over and I need to know exactly what my rights are before I do anything stupid." "Don't do anything," she said. "Don't pack, don't sign, don't yell, don't transfer money. Come to my office at 9 and Sloan." A pause. "I'm glad you finally called." He left Saturday morning to drive to his mother's and bring the truck. He left me a note on the counter, scrawled on the back of a receipt. "Gone to get Mom plus D. Back Sunday. Have the rooms cleared. Don't make this harder than it is." I read it twice. Then I called a moving company, packed what was unquestionably mine, and was out of that house by Sunday afternoon, into a furnished one-bedroom across town that smelled like fresh paint and somebody else's life. I left his note in the kitchen sink and ran the disposal. My attorney was a small woman with a sharp grey bob and the kind of calm that makes other people nervous. She sat me down and laid it out like she was reading me a weather report. "The 3,800 is recoverable. He unilaterally dissipated a marital asset to enrich his separate family. We'll demand it back. The house, you put down 60% of the down payment from your savings and a gift from your parents, correct?" "Yes, we have the records." "And for the last 3 years, your income has covered roughly 70% of the mortgage, all of the property taxes, and all of the homeowner's insurance while he was, what did you call it, going in on a landscaping business with his brother." Hearing it laid out as a column of facts made me sick. I knew I earned more. I knew I paid more. I had never let myself add it up into a single number because the number was a story about my marriage I hadn't been ready to read. "It means," she said, and there was something cold and pleased in her eyes, "we are not asking for half. We're asking for a disproportionate share based on contribution and his waste. We aim for 65-70% of the equity. He can't buy you out. He'll have to sell." She set down her pen. "Now, your action items. New bank account at a different institution today. Redirect your deposit. Change every password you have. Document every contact, every text, every voicemail with dates. Make a list of anything you owned before the marriage. And from this moment on, you are a black hole. He gets nothing from you. Anything he wants to say, he says to me. Can you do that?" I thought about my husband's face, that mild inconvenience, that easy, ugly word. "Yes," I said, "I can do that." He started calling Sunday night and didn't stop. 40 calls in 2 days. I put my phone on Do Not Disturb for everyone but my attorney, my boss, and my parents, and I watched the missed calls stack up like cordwood, and I screenshotted every threatening text into a folder my attorney told me to label. The text went angry, then pleading, then angry again. "You're insane. After everything I do for this family, you'll regret this. My mother is devastated. Pick up the phone, you called." I didn't pick up the phone. He found me anyway. I should tell you exactly how, because I know how this sounds, and the truth is boring. He followed me. I'd stayed late at the office that Thursday, and when I pulled out of the garage, there was a pair of headlights. 3 cars back the whole way across town, and by the time I figured out what I was looking at, I'd already led him to the front door of my building. I didn't have a key for him. I hadn't given anyone my address. He just drove behind me and wrote it down. He showed up the next evening with reinforcements. I came down to the lobby because the front desk buzzed me. My building has a desk, a tired man named Hector who'd seen everything, and there they were. My husband, my mother-in-law clutching a floral suitcase, my brother-in-law standing behind them scrolling his phone like he'd been dragged to a dentist. A whole delegation come to collect the runaway wife. You changed the locks? My husband said like I'd committed a crime. It's a different building, I said. You don't live here. None of you do. My mother-in-law swept her eyes around the lobby and made a face like she smelled something. This is your big solution? A shoebox? Honey, this is a cry for help. We're worried sick about you. We just want to talk, my husband said. Family talk, no lawyers. You come home, we tear all this up, everybody calm down. He took a step toward the elevator like I was going to wave them all upstairs. I planted my feet. I'd been rehearsing in the mirror all week. He wants you emotional, my attorney had told me. He wants you to react so he can say, see, she's unstable, don't engage, state your position, enforce it. So I said, in a voice that came out steadier than I felt, Hector, these people are not my guests. They're not coming up. If they don't leave the lobby, please call the police. And I held up my phone and I let them see I was recording because Ohio is a one-party state and I'd checked and I said, I'm telling all three of you to leave. My brother-in-law finally looked up. Oh, she's recording. Somebody's been watching court TV. My mother-in-law marched toward the desk like she owned it. You're going to put your own family on the street over a misunderstanding? You took my money, I said, to fund your move into my house. That's not a misunderstanding. That's the whole thing. It was for family, my husband snapped. It's our account. I have every right. We'll let the judge sort that out. And I watched the certainty flicker in his eyes for the first time. He hadn't expected the word judge. He'd expected me scared. I held out a business card I'd been keeping in my pocket. This is my attorney. Everything goes through her now. Don't call me, don't text me, don't follow me from work again. If you have something to say it to her. He wouldn't take the card, so I set it on the desk and stepped back. Hector's already dialing. Last chance. Hector was in fact dialing. The desk phone was at his ear, and I watched my husband do the math. 3 of them, a security camera in the corner, a guy on the phone with 911, a wife who'd lawyered up in a week, and watch it not add up to anything he could win. The color came up in his face, red and helpless. You're a piece of work, he hissed, after everything I've done for you. And I asked him the question that had been sitting in my chest for 3 days. Name one thing in the last year that you did for me, not for us. For me. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. His mother stared at him, waiting, and still nothing came out. And that silence was the loudest thing in that lobby, louder than any insult. He couldn't think of one single thing. My mother-in-law snatched up her suitcase with a sound like a hiss. My brother-in-law rolled his eyes at the whole boring drama of it, and my husband, at the door, turned back with his face fraying at the edges. When you come crawling back, he said low, it won't be this easy, remember that. I didn't answer. The door shut. Hector hung up the phone, looked at me, and said, You want a water? I started laughing and couldn't stop, and then I was crying, and he handed me a little paper cone of water from the cooler and said, Take the elevator on the left, the right one's slow. Like that was the most useful thing anyone could offer, and honestly it was. 2 days later, my husband asked, through his own newly hired discount lawyer, for a meeting. My attorney told me not to go. She was right, the way she's right about most things, but I needed it. I needed to hear the pitch out of his own mouth so that the last little splinter of hope still lodged in me could finally come out. We met at a diner on a Tuesday. His idea, public, neutral, before any protection order existed. And I want to be clear about that because I never once broke a court order. The order didn't exist yet. I slid into the booth across from him with my phone in my coat pocket, recording, legal, calm. He'd shaved. He'd worn the shirt I bought him. He started soft. All apology. I screwed up. I panicked. Mom was drowning and Dustin was drowning, and I made a call I shouldn't have made alone. And just when the apology had warmed up enough, he got to the ask, because there's always an ask. So, here's what I'm thinking, he said, leaning in, lighting up like a man closing a sale. Fresh start. You move back. We tear up all the lawyer stuff. And the money. Letting your paycheck just sit there is wasteful, Sloan. Mom's great with a budget. We put everything in one account. She runs the household money. We throw the rest at the mortgage. Pay this house off in 7 years instead of 30. That's freedom. That's us being a real unit. I sipped my coffee. And the house, my name on the deed? He blinked. A half second too slow, the way he did when he was remembering a line. Right, so, Mom had a thought. To keep it simple, avoid probate, all that, you just quit claim your interest over to me. On paper. We add you back later. It's cleaner for the bank. The diner got very quiet in my ears. The man who thought a 401k was a scam was suddenly worried about probate. He was asking me to sign away my ownership of the house my parents helped me buy, the house I was paying for, so he and his mother could keep it after they'd hollowed me out. It was so naked, so stupid, and so greedy that I almost felt something like awe. Let me say it back to you, I said. I move home. I hand my paycheck to your mother. I use my money to pay off the house faster, and I sign my legal ownership of that house over to you. For simplicity. You're making it sound bad, he said. It's about trust. What do I get in this unit? You get a family. You get to come home to a clean house and not stress about the little stuff. His voice rose. Most women would kill for that. I put down my coffee. There it was, the whole of it. I wasn't a partner. I was a defective woman who hadn't yet been shown the correct path to fulfillment, which was service and gratitude. I stood up. He grabbed my wrist. Not hard, but enough. Sit down. We're not finished. We've been finished a long time, I said. I just didn't have it in writing yet. And I walked out, and he followed me into the parking lot, yelling that I'd regret it, that he'd drag the divorce out for years, that he'd make sure everyone knew what I was. I got in my car. My hands were steady. The splinter was finally out. I'd go back to that house exactly one more time, and it was a mistake, and I knew it was a mistake while I was doing it. There were things no settlement could itemize. My grandmother's letters in a shoebox at the back of my closet, the engineering award my dad framed before he died. My Danny said don't. I went on a Saturday evening when I thought they'd be out. They weren't. The garage door went up while I was in the hall with the shoebox in my arms, and the three of them came in loaded with shopping bags, and the air turned to glass. What are you doing in my house? My husband said, flat. Getting my grandmother's letters. I still legally live here. Move, please. My mother-in-law's eyes narrowed at the box. What's in there? Something valuable you're stealing. Letters. You want to frisk me. You're not taking anything until we go through it, my husband said, and he stepped between me and the door. That old trick of using his size, the body that used to be safe to me, turned into a wall. I told him to move. He told me to make him. And I told him, calm as I could, that if he didn't get out of my way, I would call the police. And something about that word, police, broke whatever was holding him together. And his hand shot out and shoved me, open-palmed, hard, square in the chest, to put me in my place. I wasn't braced for it. The box flew, letters everywhere. My heel caught the edge of the rug, and I went down sideways into the sharp corner of the entry table, ribs first, and the pain was white and enormous, and I heard myself cry out. For 1 second, nobody moved. And then his face changed, the anger draining out, replaced by the dawning horror of a man who's just felt a line break under his feet. "You saw that," my mother-in-law shrieked, pointing a finger at me. "She threw herself. She's trying to set him up." I didn't say anything. I got to my knees, every breath a knife in my side, and I gathered my grandmother's letters one at a time and put them back in the box. I picked up my dad's frame. I stood up and I looked at the three of them. Her vicious triumph, my brother-in-law's slack-jawed nothing, my husband's white face, and I memorized it. Then I walked out, and this time he didn't move to stop me, because he couldn't, and I drove to an urgent care 2 miles away. I want you to hear that part. I didn't go home to ice it and tough it out. I drove straight to urgent care, told the nurse exactly what happened, let them photograph it, let them put it in my chart with a date and a time, and I let them x-ray my ribs because cracked ribs can puncture a lung, and I have a healthy respect for things that bear loads past their limit. 2 were fractured. It was all documented by a neutral medical professional within the hour. Then I sat in my car in the urgent care lot, lifted my shirt, and took 3 clear photos of a bruise, the exact shape of a table corner, blooming purple. I texted them to my attorney with 4 words. He put hands on me. She wrote back in under a minute. Now we have everything. Tomorrow we file for the protection order and we go to war. The protection order was granted on the strength of the medical record and the photos. After that, I never went near that house again, never had to, because everything left to take could be done through lawyers and movers. Everything you're about to hear, I watched from a careful distance, which is the only safe place to watch a building come down. The temporary orders hearing took 20 minutes. I sat at the petitioner's table in a navy suit that covered the bruise, my attorney beside me with her tabbed binders, my husband across the aisle in a sport coat that didn't fit, next to a strip mall lawyer who already looked seasick. The judge was a woman in her 60s with reading glasses and no patience whatsoever, and she'd read the filings. My attorney laid out the income disparity, the dissipated savings, the protection order, the medical records, and then she set a small recorder on the table and said there was a conversation from the diner that spoke to my husband's intent. His lawyer objected. The judge, not even looking at him, overruled it. Ohio, one-party consent, perfectly legal, and my attorney pressed play. My own voice filled that quiet courtroom, asking about my name on the deed. And then his voice, slick and coaxing, "Quit claim your interest over to me. On paper. Add you back later. It's cleaner." The judge took off her glasses. She looked at my husband for a long moment, then at his lawyer. "A quit-claim deed," she said very softly. "Counsel, does your client make a habit of these generous offers to simplify things?" His lawyer wished out loud he could be anywhere else. By the time she was done, my husband was ordered responsible for 100% of the mortgage and the upkeep until trial. Given the income disparity, she said, that's only fair, and ordered to pay $5,000 toward my attorney's fees, and barred from any contact outside of counsel. He lunged across the aisle as we stood, hissing that I'd set him up, and the bailiff stepped forward, and my attorney slid between us and said she'd be happy to explain to the judge why he was intimidating her client in the judge's own courtroom, and his discount lawyer hauled him back by the arm. I didn't gloat. I picked up my bag and walked out, and for just a second in his face, under all the rage, I saw a bewildered child who could not understand how the thing he'd always controlled had stopped obeying him. The collapse was fast. He couldn't carry the mortgage on a landscaping business that had never cleared a profit, and he couldn't carry his mother and his brother on top of it, and the brother's business folded entirely by summer when a client sued over a retaining wall that slid into a neighbor's pool. The house went into default and then to a forced sale, and after the realtor and the back payments and my disproportionate share, my husband walked away with just enough to get the three of them a two-bedroom apartment back in his mother's old town and not $1 more. The home he tried to build his comfort on, with my back as the foundation, was just gone. There was a man at work too. A guy who'd wanted the principal slot and lost it to me, and who'd gotten wind of the protection order and tried to use my messy personal life as a reason the partners should rethink whether I was stable enough to lead a $40 million job. He smiled at me by the elevators one evening and said, "Perception matters," said people talk. I let him finish. Then I mentioned lightly that I'd hate for anyone to revisit how he'd gotten the survey data for the Riverside pitch. The data a frightened junior analyst had told me he'd pressured out of her against every compliance rule we had. His smile fell off his face. 2 weeks later, he left to pursue other opportunities, escorted out by the same security desk that had once watched my husband get turned away. My boss sent a bottle of good rye to my office with a card that said one word: onward. His mother kept calling, of course. Different numbers, voicemails dripping with sugar. "Woman to woman, sweetie. This lawyer business is so extreme. Come have dinner. No lawyers, just us girls." I saved everyone and forwarded them to my attorney, who labeled them and laughed. His sister. I'm sorry, I keep getting it wrong. My brother-in-law sent the texts. His brother sent me a message at midnight once that just said, "Hope you end up alone." I saved that too. People who think you're stupid keep handing you evidence. You just have to be willing to file it. There was one more job offer in all of this, and it changed everything. The bridge work had put me on a map I didn't know I was on, and a firm in Denver came calling. A senior principal role building out a whole new infrastructure resilience division. Mountains and water and seismic retrofits. The kind of work I dreamed about in school before I learned to want smaller things. It meant leaving Cleveland. It meant a clean slate 2 time zones away. My attorney's eyes lit up when I told her, because nothing helps a settlement like a soon-to-be ex who believes you're so desperate to flee that you'll give away the store, so we let him believe it. And he caved. Within the week, a 65-35 split, the $5,000 in fees, and a mutual non-disparagement clause he signed from a library computer because he didn't have internet anymore. I signed mine from a sunlit apartment in Denver with a view of the Front Range turning pink, and the money hit an account with only my name on it, and I sat there a long time just looking at the number, which was not really a number. It was a door. He called once more, about 3 months into Denver. A number I didn't know, and I should have let it ring. But something made me answer. His voice was unrecognizable, hollowed out, all the swagger gone. The house, the business, his job, gone. The house, the business, his job, gone. His mother and his brother fighting every night about whose fault it was. He said he'd made a mistake. He said he hadn't known what he had. He said he was nothing without me, and I could hear that he was crying, this small, ugly sound, and he was waiting for me to give him the thing I'd always given him, which was a soft place to land. I looked out my window at a mountain that had been standing there for 60 million years, indifferent and enormous, and I felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not even anger, just a great clean quiet. "I don't care," I said. I heard him stop breathing. "What?" "Your mistake, your loss, your nightmare. I don't care." I said it plainly, the way he'd once told me his mother was moving in. "Don't call this number again. The next call I make is to my attorney." And I hung up. And I blocked the number, and I went back to the drawings on my screen. A footbridge over a creek in a town I was learning to love. A thing I was building that would carry people gently across a gap. It's been almost 2 years now. There's a man here, a furniture maker who restores old timber frame barns. And the first time he came over, I handed him a one-page cohabitation agreement before he'd even taken his coat off. Contributions split by income, not down the middle. A chore chart, a clause about long-term family guests. A conflict process. He read the whole thing standing in my kitchen, and instead of looking hurt, he started grinning, and he said it was the most attractive thing anyone had ever served him. And then he asked if we could add a section about who controls the thermostat, because he runs cold and he wanted it in writing. We negotiated for an hour. It was the best night I'd had in years. I gave a talk last month to a room full of women in hard hats and blazers about boundaries as the most underrated engineering principle there is. That every structure that lasts is built on knowing exactly how much load a thing can bear, and that the same is true of a life. And that no is not a failure of love, it's a specification. Afterward, a young woman came up, couldn't have been 25, and told me she'd left a marriage that was making her smaller and she'd been terrified she'd done the wrong thing, and hearing me had let her stop second-guessing it. I held both her hands and told her she'd just done the bravest piece of structural analysis of her life. She'd looked at the load and the limit, and she'd been honest about the numbers. She laughed and so did I, and on the drive home through the mountains, the man who runs cold reached over and turned the heat up 2 degrees, exactly as agreed. And I let him because we'd put it in writing, and because for the first time in a very long time, home was a place I'd designed myself. For a long time, I believed that being a good wife meant subtracting myself a little more every year, until there was just enough of me left to keep everyone else comfortable. My husband counted on that. His mother counted on it. Even Dustin, who never once paid back a dime, counted on it. And the hardest truth I had to sit with is that they counted on it because I let them. Nobody drains an account that's locked. They drained me because I left myself open year after year, telling myself that patience was the same thing as love. What changed everything wasn't luck. The night I logged into our savings and saw the $3,800 gone, I didn't scream and I didn't beg. I drove to urgent care and let a stranger photograph the bruise. I saved every voicemail. I kept the receipts. People mistake that kind of steadiness for coldness, but it isn't cold at all. It's the discipline of refusing to lie to yourself about what the numbers are telling you. The same clear eyes that let me read a load calculation finally let me read my own marriage, and once I read it honestly, I couldn't unsee it. I want to be careful here because winning in a courtroom is not the lesson. The lesson is that my husband's life came apart for the same reason mine came together. He made his choices, and his choices made him. He chose to take what wasn't his and call it family. He chose to try to trick me into signing away a house I'd paid for. Every one of those was a brick, and he stacked them himself. And when the wall came down, it came down on him. I didn't have to push it. I just had to stop being the foundation. If you take anything from what happened to me, let it be these. Keep your honesty even when bending would be easier. I never lied, never forged, never did to him what he tried to do to me, and that's exactly why the judge believed me. Keep thinking clearly when everyone around you wants you emotional, because a calm mind sees the trap before it closes. And find the strength to hold a boundary through the part where it's lonely and slow and nobody is clapping for you, because that quiet, stubborn endurance is where a new life actually gets built, one careful day at a time. The night I told him I didn't care, I wasn't being cruel. I was being honest. Finally, after years of pretending, caring had become a leash, and I'd worn it so long, I mistook it for love. Setting it down didn't make me hard. It made me free. And freedom, I've learned, isn't the absence of people who need you. It's the presence of a self you finally refuse to give away.